Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the online Ultimate Guide to State Drug Testing Laws at statedrugtestinglaws.com, a service of WFC and Associates. WFC and Associates is a national consulting firm that specializes in drug testing policy development and providing accurate and up-to-date state drug testing law information. The online Ultimate Guide to State Drug Testing Laws is the most comprehensive and up-to-date state-by-state guide to drug testing laws on the web. An annual subscription gives you easy-to-use, online, and password-protected access to individual state drug testing law information you need when you need it. Today's sponsor is Alere Toxicology. Alere is a leading provider of drug and alcohol testing services in the workplace, criminal justice, consumer, and clinical markets. Alere offers state-of-the-art laboratory services at a number of locations across the country, including 2 SAMHSA-certified facilities. Alere is also a leading provider of point-of-collection testing products for urine and oral fluid specimens, as well as breath and saliva for alcohol screening. Today's presentation is entitled Adulteration, a Trip to the Dark Side, and will be presented by Pat Pizzo, Director of Toxicology for Alere Toxicology. Prior to that, she worked as a chemist in the toxicology lab for the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Washington, D.C. She is a former member of the Federal Drug Testing Advisory Board, an inspector for the National Laboratory Certification Program, and the College of American Pathologists Forensic Urine Drug Testing Program, and board-certified forensic examiner. She has been certified as an expert witness in federal and state courts and has testified throughout the country. It is now our pleasure to hear from Pat Pizzo.
Thank you, Jessica. Well, we're going to talk about adulteration today, and we're going to talk about all the various ways that you can do that to urine, hair, and oral fluid. So let's talk about what's on the agenda. Well, first we're going to talk about compounds you add to the urine. Then we're going to talk about the compounds that you actually consume that attempt to impact drug tests. We're going to talk about devices that are available, synthetic urine that you can purchase on the internet, and then we're going to go into products that are not commonly known about, and these are the products that are used to impact hair testing and oral fluid testing. So let's start with urine drug screens, and let's take a look at the fact that you can buy a book. You can go on the internet, California NORML, which is the organization to legalize marijuana, a very comprehensive guide on how to beat urine drug screen test. Or if you'd like to, you can get one from Abbie Hoffman, if you remember him. Steal This Urine, very, very popular book for those individuals who are trying to beat a drug screen test. Or surf the net. If you go to any search engine and type in beat the drug screen test, the last time I did it, which was about a week ago, you get over 70 million hits in 0.54 seconds. That's how much is out there on the internet. They're offering as much as 200 back money guarantees for the use of these products. You could log on to High Times. It's a great source. It's one I use myself often to find out what they're actually selling. You can log on to WikiHow, and you can actually get videos on how to beat a drug screen test. Same thing with YouTube. Complete with instructions, where to buy the various products. Very, very informative if you'd like to beat your drug screen test. Now let's talk about products that can be added to the urine. Well, first of all, you add products to the urine for one of two things. You either add them to the urine to destroy all the drugs that are detected or to make them difficult to detect, or you consume products that will either dilute the sample or act as a masking agent. Those are the primary reasons that they sell the products. And there are lots of products out there. Nuclear, UrinLux, Spike. There are thousands of products that you can buy to add to urine to falsify a drug screen test. So let's just look at a couple of these products because I actually found these very, very interesting. This is Spike, and they're very proud of their products. This was created after thousands of hours of intensive lab research. It's a new revolutionary breakthrough. It's the smallest, most potent, undetectable urine purifier ever created. Quickly dissolving liquid that is colorless, odorless, cannot be detected once added to the urine, and was formulated for enzyme multiple immunoassay techniques, EMIT. So On an initial screen, if you're using EMIT, you may have a problem. You'll note they tell you it is not effective on more accurate gas chromatography mass spectroscopy. And it offers you a 200% double your money back guarantee. And believe it or not, we've actually had individuals call the lab and say, hey, we need a copy of our drug screen report so we can get our money back on this product. Obviously, we don't provide those. Examples of another ad, Nuclear. This is an upgrade from the old original Clear that was on the market. And again, the smallest, most potent, undetectable urine purifiers sold today. They're pretty consistent in what they use as their marketing. And it tells you how much to use. If you're only collecting 4 ounces, use 1 tube. If you're going over 4 ounces, use 2 tubes. You need to make sure you have the right concentration to destroy the drug. So what are the adulterants that are actually added to the urine? Well, there's a very large variety, and I've put the most popular up here. Things like nitrites, glutaraldehyde, chromium-6, iodine, acid, soap, chlorine, pH. They mix things, pH and chromium, or peroxide and peroxidase. So let's look at some of these individually. Let's look at the newest products on the market. Now, some of these, we don't even know what they are, nor do we know if they actually impact the urine. But you have to admire the marketing and look at some of the names they've given them. Minute Maid, Diamond Drop-In, Sprinkle Tinkle, Bacon Shake, The Eradicator, Stardust. They're very imaginative in naming their products. So let's look at the first one that was on the market. This is a product that was called Mary Jane Super Clean 13. It's a soap, not a detergent, and it interferes with immunoassay because it acts as a surfactant. It's very, very easily detected. When this product was first marketed, the gentleman who first marketed this product actually bought Joy Liquid, realiquated it or reportioned it out into 1 ml containers, and then sold it on the internet for $39.95. Very, very good entrepreneurship. It's very easy to detect. Why? Because the first thing we do in a laboratory is we shake that urine container to make sure it's well mixed. Well, if you shake the urine container and you get a head of foam, you can probably go ahead and test it for surfactants because it's probably going to be positive. Now, these are normally reported as invalid. There are very few labs in the United States today that are actually testing for all the adulterants that are out there individually and confirming them. A lot of labs will test for them and then report them as invalid. The reason labs have, the number of labs that test have been greatly reduced is because the restrictions, federal guidelines have placed on the ability to confirm some of these adulterants that are being used. And so because of the heavy requirements to confirm them, a lot of labs have opted to simply report invalid. There are still, I believe, 2 labs in the country that are doing all of the various assays. Most labs have given it up. Glutaraldehyde, again, one of the earlier ones on the market. We don't see it very often anymore, but it's still out there. It's easily detectable at the time of the collection because it has a very, very strong aldehyde odor. It has a very chemical odor that you can pick up very easily at the time of collection. If you are doing on-site testing, please make sure you're also testing for adulterants at the time the samples are collected or tested, because this is very easy to pick up. You can use a simple chem strip and it'll give you a positive ketone on a chem strip. Nitrites, one of the really popular ones for a very, very long time. Either potassium nitrite or sodium nitrite. It usually takes about 8 to 12 hours for this compound to actually work, and it destroys marijuana and morphine. It does not affect any of the other drugs. So if you're a cocaine user and you buy a product that contains a nitrite and add it to your urine sample, you're still going to be positive. Or a methamphetamine user. The only 2 drugs it impacts are morphine and marijuana. the industry has accepted mandatory cutoff levels for this drug. Under federal guidelines, we have a specific cutoff level for nitrites to be able to report this as a positive test result. And the way people use nitrites is nitrites are going to look very much like salt. And they would put them under their fingernails or on their hands somewhere and then pass the urine stream, over their fingernails or their hand to be able to get it into the urine sample. That's why it's very important to make sure that the donor washes their hands prior to the time of collection. pH, another one that's very easy to use and marketed very, very frequently. Usually they use hydrochloric acid. They have been known to use hydrofluoric and sulfuric acid. The effect is dependent on the volume of the urine. You buy the product, and it's usually about 1 ml. If you're adding 1 ml to 30 ml of sample, you're going to have a much more affected pH than you will if you're adding that same ml to 120 ml of sample. So the collection amount depends on the pH that we get. Now, because of that, it can be reported as either an invalid sample or an adulterated sample. There are federal guidelines that tell us when a sample can be reported as adulterated and when a sample can be reported as invalid. So depending on the amount of acid you use and the amount that you add, or the amount that's of urine that you add it to, the pH is going to change. So it could go from a classification of invalid or a classification of adulterated. Halogens. Halogens are very, very easy to come by, but they're also very easy to detect at the time of collection. Chlorine is probably the more common one that we see. It's very easy to detect at collection. Obviously, bleach is the most common adulterant that they use for the chlorine. And if it is collected and shipped to the lab, by the time it gets to the lab, it's usually going to bow out the top and the bottom of the urine container so that they look almost like round cones. They also explode when you open them. Bromine is not quite as often do we see it. However, I have seen bromine used. It is a spot chemical. It's not quite as easy to detect as chlorine because it doesn't have the strong odor that chlorine does, although it does have a very strong chemical odor. It's not nearly as strong as chlorine. Iodine is the third halogen that's used. And iodine is a little bit more difficult to deal with. And there's some reasons for that. And let's look at iodine specifically. Well, when we look at iodine, you wonder, where are they going to get it from? Well, water purification tablets contain iodine. And they're very easy to purchase at any sporting goods store. I mean, even Walmart has water purification tablets. They're not detectable at the time of collection because what they'll do is they'll crush the tablet to make it powdered form and add it to the urine so that it dissolves at the time they're providing the sample. It will destroy marijuana. In fact, it will destroy most drugs. It works in about 2 to 3 hours. Now, the issue you have with this is, although it's very, very cheap and very easy to obtain, the issue comes on the interpretation of the test results. Iodine can be given to individuals if they suspect they're going to be exposed to any type of radiation. So there is a legitimate medical reason for the use of iodine. And MROs would have a very difficult time, MROs being your medical review officers, would have a very, very difficult time in making a determination as to the amount of iodine that was detected if an individual claims they were given iodine as a preventative for exposure to radiation. It's also fairly difficult to confirm. So let's look at another chemical compound that's used very frequently, and that's chromium-6. Chromium-6 also has industry-mandated cutoff levels. The most common compounds that we see are either potassium chromate or pyridium chlorochromate. And you may be familiar with pyridium chlorochromate. It's actually used to treat urinary tract infections. So when you see samples that are kind of orange in color, that's usually an indication that the individual's taken pyridium chlorochromate. Now, it's a uniquely different adulterant in that it doesn't destroy marijuana. It actually changes the chemical structure of the marijuana metabolite that we detect in the urine. So what happens is it'll still screen positive. When we take it to GC mass spec, the metabolite that we're looking for, the carboxy-THC, is no longer there. There's another peak on the mass spec, but it doesn't match any of the standards or controls that we're actually analyzing. So there are methods to actually confirm this, but it is interesting the fact that the only drug it impacts is marijuana, and the only way it impacts marijuana is the fact that it changes the compound in the urine so that we no longer see the THC acid. Concentration determines the reporting classification. Above a certain concentration, it's reported as adulterated. Below a certain concentration, it's reported as invalid. That becomes important when you look at some of the other drugs that combine things. Stealth 51. Stealth was created to actually interfere with immunoassay-based screening, primarily enzyme multiple immunoassay techniques, or EMIT, or immunoassay type analysis. Now, it does not interfere with CEDIA, which is cloned enzyme donor immunoassay. It does not interfere with an on-site testing device most of the time. It does, however, not interfere with GC mass spec, but if you're basing it solely on an immunoassay type procedure, standard immunoassay, it can cause a negative test result. But luckily, if you're using GC mass spec, you will have no effect. Now, there are products that they actually combine, and the products that they combine, they use a small amount, for instance, of chromium-6 and a small amount of pH to where neither compound is in high enough concentration for us to report it as adulterated. But they're both there, and in that case, you would have an invalid sample. So the manufacturers of these products have become very, very aware of what criteria and what guidelines the laboratories have to follow. And they're constructing these products so that you would have description of the drug but not be adulterated, be reported as invalid. And that obviously often requires a second collection, which by that time the drug may be out of your system. So let's look at products now that are actually consumed. Well, when you consume a product, you're taking it internally, and the thought being that you will either dilute your urine sample or you will have a product that will mask or interfere with the collection of a sample, or the detection, I'm sorry. So let's look at some of the things that are consumed. Well, one of the earlier products that we saw was golden seal root. And golden seal root is an herbal compound. It's a plant product. It is a very mild diuretic. I actually had my employees volunteer to take it for me one day. And we all took a bunch of golden seal root and then did urine drug screen collections. We found out that it acts as a very mild diuretic, has about the same impact of drinking 3 or 4 cups of coffee, and it does not interfere with either immunoassay screening or with confirmation techniques. All it does is act as a dilutant to dilute the urine sample. There are lots of those out there. One of the things that you frequently hear about is creatine, and that individuals will take creatine to get a higher creatinine level. Well, it doesn't work that way. In the research studies that were done, consumption of creatine did not impact the creatinine levels in urine samples. So you can't dilute your urine sample, then take creatine to make the concentration go back up again. One of the other things that individuals often do is they will take B vitamins if they've had something to dilute the urine. If you're taking large quantities of liquid in, or you're trying to take a diuretic to dilute your sample, then the creatinine is going to be diluted, which is one of the ways we determine dilution. So what they recommend is that you take B-complex vitamins, because any of you who've taken B-complex vitamins will note that it turns your urine kind of a fluorescent yellow, and it gives it back the color that you're missing by the dilution. So if you're doing only a collection and not doing any testing at the time of collection, then the sample may look normal, but once it gets to the laboratory, it would be reported as dilute. This is an example of a product. It's a tea that's sold to cleanse your body of any drugs. And I thought it was very interesting because they give you very, very detailed instructions on how to use the product. And you'll note, avoid unwanted toxins, alcohol, coffee, vinegar, cranberry juice, prescription medications, golden seal root for 24 to 48 hours before starting your tea cleansing. Drink 6 to 8 glasses of water and eat well the day and night before starting your tea cleansing. Well, you're already flushing your system. Do not eat or drink anything other than the instructed during the cleansing process. Now, you start with 1 gallon of water. So you know where we're going with this. All right? They use the gallon of water to make their tea. And then you drink it. A gallon of water over 90 minutes. And they're very careful to tell you, take 2 multivitamins after consuming 3/4 of the cleansing tea. This is very important to do so that you have the yellow color. And then you have to be tested in 1 to 6 hours. Now, is this going to cleanse your system? Well, it's going to dilute your urine. Without a question, it's going to dilute your urine. And you don't have to buy the product, which runs about $29.95. You can simply make yourself a gallon of tea and accomplish the same thing. But they are conscientious enough to tell you to have your vitamins to make sure you get the yellow color. Well, why does dilution work? Well, when you dilute the urine, you dilute the drug. Drugs are reported as nanogram of drug per milliliter of urine. The more urine you have, the less drug you're going to have. So when you dilute a specimen, you're going to have a lower creatinine and a lower specific gravity. So what is creatinine? Creatinine is a breakdown of creatine, which is an important constituent of muscle tissue. But you can't take creatine orally and break it down to creatinine. It doesn't work that way. It has to be broken down through the muscle tissue. The levels are very, very constant. There's very little fluctuation of creatinine levels, and it's excreted entirely by the kidneys. A normal human on a random voiding should have a creatinine concentration in the range of 100 to 200 milligrams per deciliter. In a study that was done on approximately 700 individuals, they determined that the average creatinine, both male and female, the study contained both, was about 170 milligrams per deciliter. If you looked at creatinine by sex, then males are going to be slightly higher. Males averaged about 190. Females averaged about 140. Why? Because creatinine is a product of muscle mass. So the more muscle mass you have, the more higher your creatinine is going to be normally. But that 100 to 200 is where it's normal on a random collection. So getting down below 20, which is where we report a dilute sample, means you have to consume a fair amount of liquids. What is specific gravity? We also measure specific gravity when we do dilute samples. Well, specific gravity is the weight or mass of a given volume of a substance compared to water. So basically, it's how much water is in the urine. A normal human should have a specific gravity in the range of 1.010 to 1.025. Before we can report a sample as dilute, not only does the creatinine have to be less than 20, the specific gravity has to be less than 1.003. So again, you're looking at a tremendous dilution of the sample. So why does dilution work? A normal healthy human produces urine at a rate of about 1 ml per minute. So that means 60 minutes, 60 mils. However, if you drink 1 liter of water, that urine production goes up to 7.5 to 8.5 milliliters per minute and will last for anywhere from 30 to 150 minutes after you consume that 1 liter. A liter is not difficult to consume. Drink 2 liters of water, and the urine production peaks in 1 hour at 16 mils per minute and stays as high as 6 mils a minute for about 4.5 hours. So now you've diluted the urine by a factor of 6 for at least 4.5 hours. That means you've diluted the drug by a factor of 6 for 4.5 hours. So let's use an example of how this would impact the donor. Let's make an assumption, which we all know you should never do, but we're going to assume that the donor has a creatinine of 100 milligrams per deciliter, it's on the low end of normal, has a THC value of 100 nanograms per milliliter, and he voids 1 liter a day, which is normal. For us to report a dilute specimen, the creatinine has to be less than 20. This is a dilution factor of 5. That means the donor would have to void 5 liters a day, and that THC now would be reduced to 20 nanograms per milliliter. For it to be substituted, which is less than or equal to 2 milligrams per deciliter, it's a dilution factor of 50, which means that the donor would have to be producing 50 liters of urine a day, and the THC factor now would be reduced to 2. So you can see how dilution impacts not only THC, but any drug that's found in the urine. Again, you dilute the urine, you dilute the drug. So what is a dilute specimen? Well, a dilute specimen under federal guidelines are creatinines less than 20 milligrams per deciliter and a specific gravity less than 1.003. For us to report a substituted sample, the creatinine has to be less than 2 milligrams per deciliter or not detected, and a specific gravity less than 1.0010 or greater than 1.0200. Why do they give us an upper end? Well, they give us an upper end because I have seen samples come into the lab that are not urine, that have no creatinine, and have a very high specific gravity. Regular Mountain Dew is a prime example of that. And so you may get a sample that has none or low creatinine and a very high specific gravity. If they're using a substance to substitute that has sugar in it, like a soft drink or a sports drink of any kind that has sugar in it, it's going to have a higher specific gravity. An invalid result. Well, an invalid result is when a creatinine is less than 2 milligrams per deciliter and the specific gravity is greater than 1.0010 or less than 1.0200. It's also an invalid if the creatinine is okay, greater than 2, but the specific gravity is abnormal on 2 independent tests. So are there reasons for an individual to have a diluted specimen? Well, one of the things you hear most often is, my sample's dilute because I'm a diabetic. Well, scientific community did research studies where they looked at the urine of diabetics and the urine of normal individuals. And they found that although diabetics had levels perhaps 10, maybe 15 milligrams per deciliter lower than an individual who did not have diabetes, it was not in the 20 milligram per deciliter range. Obviously, renal failure could cause you to have problems with your creatinine levels. Prescription diuretics usually do not force creatinine levels down to less than 20. They may be slightly lower in the range of 50 or 60 milligrams per deciliter, but they're not going to be below that 20. Urinary tract infections, individuals who have urinary tract infections are often told to consume large quantities of liquids, and they may be doing that for health reasons, not intentionally trying to dilute their sample. Now, always remember when you do collections to follow the federal guidelines for the shy bladder collection. And those guidelines are listed in 49 CFR Part 40. If you use these, you will not have a diluted or substituted sample. And those guidelines require that you drink 40 ounces of fluid through a reasonable period of time up to 3 hours. And they suggest that you drink 8 to 10 ounces per hour, and you won't have a dilute specimen. But remember, you're producing urine at a rate of 1 mil per minute. So theoretically, 60 minutes, 60 mils. So let's now talk about the devices that are available and things like synthetic urine. The first device we're going to talk about is the urinator. The urinator was the first one on the market. The individual who actually put this on the market said, he was an engineer, said that he didn't have any problems or he didn't approve of individuals using drugs, but he didn't feel that anyone should be subjected to a urine drug screen. So he developed this product called the urinator. Now, it sells for $149.95 plus shipping and handling. You can buy drug-free urine. It's about $10 for drug-free urine. You can also, from the same company, buy a test kit. It maintains the proper body temperature for about 4 hours. And if you buy one of these, this is what you get in your kit. You get the delivery system. You get your drug-free urine. You get a pair of gloves so that you can handle it. You get a book on how to beat the drug screen test, and you get directions on how to use their products. So they're very, very careful in showing you all this. I thought it was very interesting. The individual was selling this product, and I believe it was in North Carolina he was selling it, and they objected to it being sold there, so he moved to South Carolina to sell it. There has been some attempt to get the federal government to regulate the sale of devices and products that are used to beat a drug screen test. The Whizzinator came out after the urinator. The Whizzinator is actually a prosthetic device, comes in 6 skin tones, and it again uses heating pads, has dehydrated drug-free urine with it, and it will maintain temperature for 8 hours. Now, again, the Whizzinator sells for $149.95 plus shipping and handling. If you're doing monitored collections, it's conceivable that an individual could wear a device like this and provide a negative sample. For those of you who are doing witnessed collections, it would be much harder, obviously. And I've had a number of clients say they've actually confiscated devices such as these in witnessed collection situations. The wedge, I'm going to leave it to your imagination as to what part of the body the wedge goes in. This is a device used to deliver clean urine. It does not come with any type of heating element or heating device. It depends on body heat to keep it at the correct body temperature. So there are some issues with that one as far as making sure that you're going to deliver a sample that's at the correct temperature. This is another device. It's called Clean Stream, and I thought it had a very novel approach. This one uses hand warmers to warm the urine to the correct temperature, and then you strap the delivery system to your body and deliver the sample. But I thought the use of hand warmers was a rather novel approach to heating the urine sample. And then there's synthetic urine. You can buy any number of synthetic urine samples on the internet to use to substitute a sample. They're obviously difficult to get into a collection site because you also have to have a way to hide it on your body. And since you can't take purses or coats or heavy jackets, it's more difficult to conceal a product like this, but it can be done, and people have done that. Just briefly, I will tell you, as a laboratorian, you would not believe the samples that we have received in our laboratory that were supposedly collected in both witnessed and monitored collections that had no resemblance to urine. We've received apple juice, triaminic yellow cough syrup. We had one sample come in that had half urine, half jet fuel. How you could not notice the separation on that one was beyond me. We get a variety of products that are simply yellow in color, and they'll send them in to the lab for testing, and they're obviously not urine. So urine is probably the more common method of testing used in the United States today, but there are other testing methodologies that are available. Hair testing is one, and oral fluid testing is another. So now we're going to talk a little bit about hair testing and oral fluid testing, because these types of testing methodologies, one of the big selling points they have is that you can't adulterate it. Well, that's not quite true. So let's look at some of the issues you have with some of these other testing methodologies. So first of all, let's look at hair. Now, hair is not pulled from the root follicle. It is cut at the scalp level. So first of all, the drug has to get from the root above the scalp level to be collected, which takes anywhere from 5 to 14 days for it to get there, above the scalp level, that is. So what you're dealing with then is you're dealing with how can you affect the hair that is above the scalp level. So let's look at some of the ways that they do that. Well, first of all, you do have to realize that hair is not plucked out of the head. It is cut normally at the back of the nape of the neck, and they try to get it as close to the scalp as possible so that they can get a representative of what they're reporting as a 3-month time period. So adulterants for hair, well, what can you use? Well, the main things they're using for hair testing are shampoos and chemicals. And the chemicals are the ones that are the most detrimental. So what chemicals can you put on hair that could impact a drug test? You have to understand hair testing to begin with, okay? And the thing you need to realize is there have been documented studies where using lab rats that are black and white spotted lab rats, they gave the lab rats a dose of drug and then collected the black hair and collected the white hair. And they found tremendously discrepant levels between the white hair and the black hair. So melanin, which is what makes your hair dark, is where drugs are deposited. So if you bleach your hair and strip the melanin from your hair, you're also stripping drug from your hair, which obviously makes it much more difficult to find because you've stripped the drug from the majority of hair. Perming your hair, again, you're adding drugs to your hair, you're breaking that sulfur bond and and letting it reform in the curled position. But the chemicals are harsh and can also do damage to the hair itself, and can make it difficult to detect the drugs. There are natural options that are recommended on the internet using things like lemon juice and vinegar, which again are attempting to bleach the hair out, much milder than actually using a bleaching solution, but same process. You're trying to strip the melanin out of the hair. There are kits that they sell on the internet. One kit that I looked at was a kit that contained a pre-wash rinse, a shampoo wash, and a post-conditioner rinse. Another one was a hair mud that you actually applied to the hair and left it in. A hair cleaner with a two-step process, and a free shower cap. These products gave no indication on their websites as to how much success they had with beating a drug screen test. I would doubt seriously that this type of product would have any effect whatsoever on a hair test. So, but they are selling a lot of those on the internet. So let's talk about products used for oral fluid testing. Well, oral fluid is collected in front of you. It's not like an individual has to go to another room or anything. You're watching that person. They put the collection pad in their mouth. You collect the sample, and it goes into the shipping device. So it'd be very difficult to attempt to adulterate a product like a collection like this. Well, there are some types that are being sold and are reported to have success. One of them is mouthwash, also cleansers, and gum are the three most common that are used for oral fluid testing. Mouthwash, it's a saliva detoxing. It's mint flavored. It says it works in 3 to 40 minutes. It's rated #1 by High Times. What better reference can you get? They claim to have a 100% success rate, and they offer a $200 money-back guarantee. Now, does it work? Don't know. Could it work? It could. It could affect the rate at which you're producing saliva. It could potentially, depending on what it contains, make it difficult for the pad to correctly absorb drugs. So there are lots of things that it could do. What it actually does, I'm not real sure. I've never tested this product, so I don't really know. But users say that it works for them, if you believe a user. Cleansers, now these are pretty basic. You have to take them for a month and not use drugs. Well, yeah, they're going to work. If you stop using drugs for a month and you're going to be negative, on a drug screen test, it's pretty much a gimme. It's a long-term solution. This particular one says it helps clear toxins 50% faster, but if you're going to wait 30 days and then take a drug screen test, you're going to be clear anyway. This is another one that has reportedly from users, has a very high success rate. This is a gum. Again, mint flavored, effective for all toxins. Again, rated very highly by High Times Magazine. It works for 30 minutes after you use it. The cost, $90 for a pack of gum. 99% success rate, 200% money-back guarantee. Oral fluid testing is relatively new if you compare it to urine drug screen testing. And it may be that we're going to have the same type of requirements at collection that you do when you have a breathalyzer test for the detection of alcohol. if you're familiar with the breathalyzer test, you have to be observed for 15 minutes before they administer the test. The reason why is if you use a mouthwash that contains alcohol, or if you use a breath spray that contains alcohol, immediately before a breathalyzer test, you're going to be positive. So they allow that 15 minutes for anything that you may have used right before you took the test to dissipate and to not affect the test. It may come to, it hasn't yet, but it may come to this with oral fluids that will have to allow a waiting period, an observed waiting period for individuals before the collection actually takes place to account for any of these types of adulterants that they're using. And this is the Good for Everything product. I put this one up here because I just love this. The 5-day cleanse, perfect for 4 to 5 times per week users. It's a 5-day program that eliminates traces of any past drug use from your urine, your blood, your saliva, and your hair. Excuse me. It's not a mask. It's completely undetectable. You get a 100% money-back guarantee, and it comes with a free self-test kit. So you'll know, of your choice, by the way, so you'll know whether or not you were going to test positive or not. And again, it has very detailed steps as to what you have to do and day by day for all the various steps to make sure you're clear. It then goes into the detoxifying shampoo kit so that you can also clear it out of your hair. Then you have a hair enhancer. Then you have another detoxifying shampoo. And throughout the thing, drink lots of water and unsweetened tea and take multiple vitamins every day. They're really good on keeping you healthy. So detection and reporting. If you're doing an on-site collection, please make sure you're testing for adulterants. If it's not built into the kits you're purchasing, you can buy a simple test strip, that will test for the more common adulterants that we see. It gives you creatinine, nitrite, glutaraldehyde, pH, specific gravity, bleach, which is your chlorine, and pyridium chlorochromate. The more common ones are all going to be picked up. It's simple, easy to use. If you collect it and shake it up and it foams, you probably have soap. Detection at the lab. Obviously, at the laboratory, we're doing specific analytical procedures, and we are reporting tests either as adulterated or as invalid possible oxidant activity. Dilution is detected by the analysis of creatinine and specific gravity, and they're reported as either substituted, invalid, or dilute. So how are they reported? Well, an adulterant is when we identify and confirm an actual adulterant. In other words, we report it as nitrite or pH too low, pH too high, chromium-6 present. If we can't identify an individual adulterant, but we know it's interfering with the drug test, we will report it as invalid, possible oxidant activity, or abnormal pH. Those are the primary ways that we will report samples for invalid. So when reporting, use a medical review officer. So what is a medical review officer? Well, a medical review officer is a medical doctor trained in substance abuse, and they should be certified. There are agencies that certify your MROs. When do you use them? To interpret all confirmed non-negative results. Why do you use them? Because MROs are trained to interpret drug screen test results and stay current with federal and state laws. And the benefit of using an MRO is an MRO is an independent. The employer has not made the decision that a test is positive. That's generally why clients use medical review officers. Now, if you're doing regulated testing under the federal guidelines, it's mandated that you use an MRO. If you're doing non-regulated testing, it's an option for most companies. Some states mandate the use of an MRO. What about your company policy? Well, be uniform, keep it simple, update routinely, address the issues of adulteration. If you cite federal or state guidelines, make sure you're up to date on all the changes. If you're going to put something and hardwire it into your policy, make sure that if the federal government changes their guidelines, that you change yours. Be consistent in the application of your program, and you may want to look at changing with trends in technology. So what about state and federal laws? Well, you can go to the DOT, and there's program guidance on water loading studies, which explains to you a little bit more about how water will affect your drug screen. And you can go to drugfreeworkplace.gov to get information. So now we're going to go to the question and answer section and see if we have any questions. Okay, here's a question. Is it an urban myth that poppy seed muffins can cause a false positive for opiates? No, it's very true, actually. Poppy seeds will give you a positive for morphine. In a test that was done where people ate poppy seed strudel, which was made with the poppy seed extract, the individuals had levels as high as 11,000 nanograms per milliliter of morphine in their urine. Tests where they used poppy seed muffins, poppy seed bagels, poppy seed dressing, levels ranged anywhere from 300 to 3,000 nanograms in the urine, and these samples would be positive for about 24 to 48 hours. So the one with the poppy seed was actually positive for a little over 72 hours. So it's possible. Very, very real. You have to be very careful when you're interpreting morphine-only positives. What does this mean? Only morphine or all opiates? Would the donor have to provide proof of receiving iodine if for medical condition or radiation exposure? Yes, they would. They would have to show that to the company or to the medical review officer, indicating that they had a valid prescription to take iodine for exposure to radiation. They couldn't just say, this is why I did it, and therefore that's why I'm positive. They would have to give you valid documentation. Is a hard copy, electronic copy of the presentation available to the participants? I believe it is, but Jessica can address that. I have heard that vegetarians may come up short on creatinine. Is that correct? No. Vegetarians do not produce creatinine at a rate less than normal humans. That is not a fact. Is there any interesting myth that you know of regarding cheating the drug screen test? Well, there are lots of myths. I'm not sure of any in particular. Has this been tested against OraSure? I'm guessing you're talking about the products that are used for the oral fluid. I don't know that. I don't know if they have. I don't think they have. I mean, as I said, I don't know that any of these actually work very well. All I know is that the users claim that they do. Okay. Well, there were no more questions, so I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica. Jessica, are you there?
I am, Pat. Thank you. I will go ahead and walk us on out. Thank you so much for your time and for all that wonderful information. And on behalf of the online Ultimate Guide to State Drug Testing Laws at statedrugtestinglaws.com and Alere Toxicology, we hope that you found today's presentation informative and helpful. This presentation was recorded, and you will receive instructions informing you how to access the recording. Thank you for your attendance, and this concludes today's webinar.